folks. Welcome into a new edition of Bullet Point 716. I'm one of your hosts today, Kevin Masseri, here as always with Mike Bunt. We're going to be breaking down. Actually, there's a football game going on too. Don't want to forget about that. 17-3 at halftime, UB Ball State. Check that out. So from last season, last game of the season, Maction over there with football. So we'll keep you posted on that. But we're mainly going to be here to talk about the UB basketball game, a 79-78 loss to Stephen F. Austin, a team regarded probably as a mid-MAC school, like mid in the mid-range of the MAC program. They've been good in recent years. It's still a team that historically you need to take care of. You go on to Cancun, Mike, to play Stephen F. Austin, get an okay win, and then gear up against a top 100 team in St. Louis. That was the goal. Now you're staring at Illinois State, a team in the 200s, in the face, and you just not really what you came down to Cancun for. Am I right?
Yeah, that's concerning. The reason why you go to Cancun is for that matchup on a neutral court against St. Louis, and that's the whole point of it, not to play Illinois State. And right now we're 4 games into the season. It's too early to freak out or panic, but there's a lot of concerning signs about this team. The fact that they've now played a team like North Texas and a team like Stephen F. Austin and trailed by double digits in the second half shows that they don't constantly have it. They go through a lot of stagnant periods, both on the offensive and defensive sides of the court. And if this continues against teams like Western Kentucky, against teams like UC Irvine, St. Bonaventure, and some of the other more difficult teams on the non-conference part of their schedule, I think you can say there's legitimate concerns about how this team will perform heading into MAC play.
I'm interested to hear your opinions first, and then obviously I'm very well versed in to give mine, but I'm going to bounce it to you, a bounce pass over to you, Mike. What are your biggest concerns right now with the 2-2 UB Bulls, who were down double digits on the under 8 last game as well against North Texas before the Rider game? They seem to be able to take care of teams in the 200s, which they're going to have plenty of in MAC play, which there's some bad teams. They're struggling with the middle tier teams. Like, they played okay against Michigan, whatever. I don't think Michigan's as good as their record or their ranking shows. The record probably says who they are. Mike, they're struggling with those 100 to 200 ranked teams, and they're going to get plenty of them in MAC play with Kent. Ohio's at the top of that, but you're going to get Ohio, you're going to get Kent, you're going to get Akron, you're going to get Miami. Now, as we talked about on a pregame show, I said Miami was in the top 4. They might be the 3rd best team in the conference. So now you got all these teams, and then always pesky, Akron and Kent, regardless of if they're up or down, they're going to be pesky. They're going to be right around the Stephen F. Austin team. At their down years, they're going to be about as good as the Stephen F. Austin's good years. So you got to worry about that in this conference. Yes, you get Ohio once. Yes, you only get Akron once. That's a semi-break if you want to call it that. But that's around 8 games against teams in this Stephen F. Austin range. These teams, most of those teams we mentioned are probably better than Stephen F. Austin. Is that a concern that they're not taking care of business, and that it took 8 for 8 against UNT to win that game, and then similarly 7 for 8, and then they just ran out of gas? That's a concern, right, Mike? Give me your concerns.
Absolutely a concern. And my list of concerns is it's becoming pretty big at this point in the season. And what I would start out with is coaching. I feel like we're seeing the same thing we've seen for the last couple of seasons under Jim Weitzel. I like the guy. He's a great human being, but nothing's improving. You would think with a roster as senior top heavy as this Bull squad is, that they would be ready early in the year, that they wouldn't need as much time to adjust. Normally it's younger teams that need November and December to get ready for MAC play. This is a team where you return Josh Mballa, Rondo Segou, and Janathan Williams. They should be at the point where early in the year they can still have decent basketball. Number 2 concern, lack of shooting. This team does not have good perimeter shooting. Maceo Jack is an upgrade. He's a good player, but behind him, there is not much. Rondo Segou can hit a 3, but you don't want to rely on him. Same with Janathan. He can hit 3s. Don't want to rely on him. There's not enough quality shooting on this squad. The ball movement is sometimes exceptional, like the end of the first half where they just so happen to miss a layup. But overall, the ball movement on this team is average at best. That's one of the biggest differentiators from this squad and what Nate Oates did. They had so many easy looks in 2018-19. It wasn't that Nick Perkins and CJ Massenberg were always the best athletes. They just moved the ball great, and they had easy looks, and they hit. And then the two biggest things that really stand out for me, the defensive intensity. This team does not play quality defense for large stretches of the game. Their lack of defensive rebounding today was just – it was boggling my mind. To allow 13 offensive rebounds to mid-major like Stephen F. Austin in a half of basketball is just unacceptable. And I had somebody reach out to me. That is an effort thing. That's just, they were just getting out hustled in the first half. And the second thing, defensively, UB was at their best when they had guys like Dante Carruthers and Devontae Jordan playing great on-ball defense. They just don't have that. And it's not all Rondo Segu's fault. He's a smaller guy. He's not lengthy, and he's going to get exposed with his height. And you live with it because he's a great offensive player. But 20 turnovers today. 20.
Six by the aforementioned Segu.
20. Like at one point in the first half, they had 8 turnovers and only 5 field goals, and that was with like 6.5 minutes left in the first half. Like, this is not a team that is showing that they can rise to another level. Now, I think they will. I still think this is a quality basketball team, but I went into this year picking them to win 23, 24 games. I think I'm starting to lower that bar a little bit closer to the 2021 win level because they're not showing they can put away that mid-level tier. And to add your point, Kevin, I think in the beginning of the year, we thought there was this big separation from UB and then the next tier in the MAC. That is starting to lessen. I think teams like Ohio, Toledo, Miami are all going to be able to give UB games. And Ken and Akron, they're always good. The only real benefit for UB is that right now in the MAC, you have a quality 1 through 6, and then your 7 through 12 looks awful.
Terrible.
But
they're losing to D3 teams, the 7 to 12.
Yeah.
So I think Central lost to another one tonight.
But I'm a little worried about this non-conference schedule right now because you have a couple softies at Alumni Arena that really aren't going to teach you anything about this squad. And a lot of the tough games are on the road. And this team is showing away from Alumni Arena that they don't bring it consistently. So a lot of concerns.
Yeah, I mean, there are a bunch of concerns here to worry about. And I think the number one concern is you look at the statistics, the raw statistics from today, and you have 10 assists, not good enough, to 20 turnovers. That is a negative ratio. That is not a ratio that wins games. It's something that actually the math major in Nate Oates used to talk about all the time was that ratio. You needed around 2. It was not at 2. It was 1/4 of that. It was a 0.5. You just can't win games when you're turning it over 20 and you're only assisting on 10. That's going to be a very brutal situation. Now, rebounds wise, 35 to Stephen F. Austin, 34 to UB. Without Fagan in the games, Fagan had 8 of them. The team was not, and Mbala had 9. Besides that, the team was not rebounding. I don't know what Brock does in the game, but he doesn't do anything.
And that's so misleading too, because you allowed 15 offensive rebounds. So sure, you got the rebound advantage, but how many second chance opportunities did they give? At one point, so at the end of the first half, Stephen F. Austin was 15, I think, of 40 shooting. And UB was 9 of 23. There was a 17-shot disparity in the first half alone. And one of the CBS Sportsnet commentators said, when you're getting outshot by 17 shots in a half of basketball, there's probably a few things you need to work on. And that was a simple way of saying, you guys did not put much effort in the first half. You got out-hustled. You got outplayed. You did not bring it. And the frustrating part about that is UB cannot afford to take any teams for granted. And we knew that Stephen F. Austin would be a quality opponent. So the fact that UB comes back in the second half shows that they do have some fight. They do have some hustle in them. But why did it take them going down 11 with about 10 minutes left for them to get to that point where they suddenly realize we have to increase the intensity? That never should have gotten to that point. You play that way from the beginning, UB wins this game. The fact was, they didn't.
And now you add a neutral court, most likely, don't want to upset anybody, a neutral court game against Illinois State. I mean, that's just not what you came to Cancun for. I got to harp on it. You came down there to get a pretty decent win against Stephen F. Austin on neutral floor, and then face the St. Louis team that if you lose that one, doesn't really sting you too much on a neutral court, around the same ranking roughly. And if you do win both, you're probably getting toward that top 70 number that you're looking for early on in the season. You still have a tough one at Bonnie's, who just keeps on winning games. Like, as bad as they have looked in times, they didn't look bad just recently. They looked pretty poor against Canisius pretty much the entire day. They eked one out against Clemson that they should have lost. Marquette, they played pretty good in. You let them hang around enough to finally find their footing. And
I'm glad you brought up St. Bonaventure, because there's a couple differences, major differences in the way I look at both of these teams, because some people have asked me, why aren't you more critical of St. Bonaventure when they get off to poor starts? And I think I have been a little critical of them in some of these games. Against Clemson, they were slow, and then against Canisius, they nearly lost. The difference between a Bonaventure slow start and a UB slow start is that when the Bonnies stink, it's because their offense isn't in flow. They still shut teams down defensively. They're hustling, they're forcing turnovers, they're making plays. Their shots just aren't falling, and their offense is kind of lackluster. But because they have that defensive intensity, they know they can hold teams to a period of 6-7 minutes where they allow 2 points, 3 points. UB doesn't have that ability. UB needs to be clicking in order to be successful. And also, Mark Schmidt has guided the Bonnies to 3 NCAA tournaments. He gets the benefit of the doubt. He does. I mean, he turned around that program from one that people thought should go to the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference to one that is now a perennial A-10 contender. UB, they hired a coach that couldn't get to the tournament in the Horizon League. And now that school has
he set the stage for Porter Moser.
Now Porter Moser took that program to a Final Four, and now they're going to go to the A-10 in a year. So I do wonder how much of this is talent, how much of this is coaching. I don't think it's fair to say how much to each, but you got to wonder. This is year 3 of the early season losses that just leave you scratching your head.
Mike, you can go down the rabbit hole with the future if we want right now. I don't know if we'll get there at some point here. I don't know. I don't know if it's the show today to talk about
probably not today.
lack of future on the team right now. I mean, we're talking about Bonnies too. You look at them. I'm worried about their future too. They're kind of in the same boat. The difference is they're ranked and they're accomplishing their goals. UB isn't. They're losing games.
If you accomplish your goals, you're okay with sacrificing
a year. Yeah, you need a rebuild year. First, everybody does. Even beside, unless you're Duke, unless you're even the Syracuse of the world or whoever, they all need rebuild years. I mean, you can't have a senior heavy team that's ranked and then look at UB's team a couple of years ago. Fine. But what you can't have is sell this year this year as the year. Lose to Stephen F. Austin, played 20 terrible minutes against Michigan. It's fine. No one's you're not going to win that battle against Michigan, Mike, no matter who you're talking to. Yeah. People are going to say that was a fine performance. So we'll move on from that game. I'm not going to move on from the terrible UNT performance, the terrible Stephen F. Austin performance. Don't take neutral court games. Get some home games. I'd rather you play a ranked 200 team if you're not going to get it done on neutral court. Stop going to North Texas. If that's how you're going to play, stop taking that game. Stop taking it. You already played Michigan. You're going to play Bonnies. Stop taking these middle tier games if this is how you're going to roll out on neutral floor.
And I love that you brought that up, because here's the thing. The reason why they play UNT, the reason why they're playing in Cancun, the reason why they're scheduling teams like Western Kentucky is because Jim Weitzel entered this year thinking this is the team that needs resume wins to pump up their resume, which means you and I, we've watched college basketball. I've covered college basketball up close at many D1 programs, all 4 in Buffalo, Ohio University, a little bit Ohio State, Purdue, Fort Wayne. I've even seen Indiana up close.
Yep.
When you have the schedule that UB has, it's because there's a belief within the program that they're playing for something more than a traditional season. Like if Coach Weitzel thought this is just an average UB squad, that's what he would do. He wouldn't schedule Western Kentucky. He wouldn't schedule North Texas. He wouldn't schedule Michigan. He would have just loaded up the schedule with a bunch of bye games at home, inflated their record, had a team ranked around 100 to 90 going into MAC play, thinking, oh, we're great. We're 9-3, 9-2. No, he went out and scheduled these games because he thought maybe we are a top 50 team. Maybe we are a top 60 team. That's why Jonathan Williams told me before the year that the goal is the Sweet 16. Whether you think that's realistic or not, that's what he told me. That's why people inside the Buffalo program are telling me, Mike, it wasn't really fair to be critical of Jim Weitzel his first 2 years. He took over for Oates. He needed to get his own guys. He needed to coach them up. It's all building for this year. Those inside the athletic department have told me it was about this year. So that being said, you can't just then give them excuses when they lose these games. I know there's the thought process with UB fans that in the past just accept that like mediocrity. With Reggie Witherspoon, with all those years, it was accept 20 wins. Be happy. We used to suck, so be happy. We don't suck anymore. I have this saying. A lot of people like to say, what would Jesus do? Well, instead of what would Jesus do, what would Nate Oates think? What would Nate Oates think? And the reason I bring that up is people would laugh when Nate Oates used to talk about making UB the Gonzaga of the East. But you know what? The reason why UB was so good was because Nate Oates believed in it. As long as he was going to be the head coach at the University at Buffalo, he was going to do the best to make sure that they were the best program that they could possibly be. So even if that meant unrealistic expectations, it elevated everybody around him. Anything but perfection was not to be accepted. Hustle, work hard, get results. That's the Nate Oates way. And right now, that is not the way of this team, and it is not the way of this fan base. We have gone back to accepting 21 wins, 22 wins. That's nice. You know what? Nate Oates won 27 and then 32 his third and fourth years at UB. And these players, Jonathan and Rondo, those were his top two recruits from his final class that came to UB. What would Oates be expecting to do with these guys right now?
What would Oates do?
He'd be saying I'm okay with 21.
WWOD. What would Oates do?
Yeah. He would be saying this is going to be a team we're going to go and win games, and we're going to try to win in the tournament. And for whatever reason, it's not looking like this is a team that could win the tourney. They can certainly get to the tourney, and I get the whole viewpoint. You play for Cleveland. You play for a successful MAC season. That's the way the majority of MAC schools are. And if you want to have that point of view, fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That's the way the majority of mid-major programs are. But this program was elevated for a 4-year period under Oates. And if you extend back to Hurley, a 6-year period where that was not the expectation. They elevated the expectation. So we can either go back to the way things were and accept mediocrity at UB, or we hold this team accountable and try to have them continue to aim for a higher potential that we're seeing all these other mid-major programs elevate themselves on a yearly basis. Where was Loyola 10 years ago? Where was Butler 15 years ago? Where were half these other programs? They stunk. They weren't what they were.
You're right.
All I'm saying is UB, you had the opportunity in front of you. Don't blow it. This is your last year to capitalize before you suddenly start to get into, well, maybe that was just a once-in-a-generation type situation.
But you should know more than anyone. I mean, UB or Ohio blew it, you know?
Yeah, that's why I'm passionate. I saw it at Ohio. They blew it. They had a coaching change, then another coaching change, and they brought in good recruits, but it just fizzled until they hit the jackpot with Jeff Bowles. But it goes away real fast. And you and I, we're not going to get into this today, but if they don't capitalize this year, good luck next year when they have 3 sophomores possibly in their starting lineup and a bunch of depth guys really leading the way.
Yeah, for sure. Mike, we got to talk about, I mean, this is everybody's show, right? Like, I want to make this like I don't want to just make this about like what we think here at Bullet Points. Like, that is a part of it. This is about what other people are saying. I want to get the pulse of the fan base. Like, that is important. It's not just Kevin. It's not just Mike. It's not just Bullet Points. It's not just what else is there? Bull Run. It's not just UB fan. It's not just whatever. Wherever I'm liked, wherever I'm hated, wherever Mike's liked, wherever Mike's hated, wherever Bullet Points is liked, wherever Bullet Points is hated. It is. I just want to talk about the general consensus of the fan. Let's talk about it now. If you go down kind of to our mentions for the day, what I just for the first time logged in and looked at just a minute ago. You've got some stuff on here. First comment is from EI Book, maybe rebound or something. Yeah, in a simplification form. Absolutely. That's absolutely an early issue, especially for 25, 30 minutes of this game. Bringing the bench if they don't want to play D or rebound for a Haupty man. If they had a bench, who are you bringing in? Who are you bringing in? You brought him in. You brought in Fagan. You tried Skogman, didn't play defense, and then didn't play. I don't understand. I'm a big Skogman fan. Michael Tursky said, really bad, no intensity, getting smacked around and destroyed on the boards. Fine. Give me a real coach, please, from J. Cav. Fair. Rick C., horrible half. It was a really bad half. They didn't play very well at all. SMH, lost for words. Okay, that's fair. Really bad, sloppy turnovers galore. Nobody seems like they want to guard anybody. That's fair. They can't play any defense from name that can't be blank. Sure. How can you expect to win a game with 20 turnovers? Walmart Man says, I'm really upset by this loss. Adam Heltwig said, bad loss. Larry Regan says, got out rebounded. Mark says, I'm significantly questioning the idea of going in-house for the Oates replacement, and then recommitting was the right idea. Recommitting was the right idea. They just seem sloppy more than sharp, and their pace of play is slower than under Oates and Hurley. They're one of the fastest tempo teams in college basketball now. They're hovering right in the 80s, 90s, trying their best to keep that pace up. Bad first half and nice comeback in the second, almost pulled it off. It's about as positive as we've seen today. David says garbage performance and a lack of effort in the first half would have been blowout if not for Segu. Whitesell got badly outcoached. EI Book then comments Whitesell got outcoached in every game he coaches. Going to put a good string to win together. Hope they can make the tourney. All right, good. That's good for Mike Kickbush. Erie County Bulls says, what a bad loss, guys. Is it just MAC now? We were told it wasn't. I think he means MAC tournament.
I think just to stop for 1 second. Yeah, that's pretty much what we're saying right now. It is just the MAC. You can't lose to teams like Stephen F. Austin and say that you're a legitimate
team.
Team. And here's the thing. This also impacts seeding. If you go to the tournament, you need a net ranking of like 80 to be around like maybe a 13, 14 range. The whole point of these type of wins and games like this is you want a net ranking around 60 so you can get that 11, 12 seed area. This team doesn't look like they're going to be in that category. When you're 13 or 14, you can win a game in the tourney. Ohio has in the last decade, but it's tough. You're going up against top 15 teams. You'd much rather get that 11, 12 seed where upsets happen all the time and you're playing a borderline top 25 team. Coming off the NIT last year, the NIT should be the bare minimum for the expectations. But if you lose enough games against average teams to not so great mid-majors, it's not a lock. It's not a lock that this UB team will be an NIT team if they lose a few more games like this.
No, there you go. Mike had a comment from the comment based on Erie County Bulls. Shane Hype Patterson then says, SFA will not end up a bad loss. We are fine. Tough one, but they'll make the tourney again.
They're good. Stephen F. Austin is a good team with a good history. Brad Underwood, the current Illinois coach, was at Stephen F. Austin. They've won games. I believe I don't know how many games, but I've seen them win a game in the tournament, I believe, in the past decade, if I'm not mistaken. But the fact is, while they're good, they haven't even been a mid-major for the longest time. They've been a small conference team. A tier below the mid-majors. They were, I believe, in the Southland for a good amount of time. Don't know too much about their expectations for this year. I know they have an experienced team. But we're holding UB to a higher standard than that. Yes, losing to Stephen F. Austin is not the end of the world. But if UB wants to be a top 60, top 70 team, you don't lose to Stephen F. Stephen F. Austin, which has metrics having them around 150 to 160 at this point in the season. Maybe that'll change. But you know why it's going to change? Because Stephen F. Austin is going to beat up on a poor schedule. They played South Dakota State a couple games ago, and they lost by 12. How many of us would accept a 12-point loss to South Dakota State right now? And that's a program I've covered in the Summit League. Not bad team, but still, you're really lowering expectations for this team if you're trying to accept a loss to Stephen F. Austin. Not the end of the world, but
Stephen F. Austin raised 12 ranking points today to 132 by the UB win alone. 12 ranking points.
That's like a MAC loss. It's like losing to Miami, Ohio, or Bowling Green, or teams like that. Like, not the end of the world, but not something that you really want.
It's not the end of the world if all you care about is the 3 games in Cleveland. Then it's not the end of the world. Of course it's not. Now, when is the end of the world? When you drop 5-12 game against Miami at home for the lockout. That's the end of the world because straight up you didn't show up again. However, moving past 2 years ago, you then didn't show up in the final. Akron, the problem is the 3 games. Akron wasn't the goal. You won in overtime against Akron. Great win. That wasn't it. You didn't have an opportunity to finish because you played your heart out in that semifinal game. There was another game waiting for you. You cannot rely on those 3 games all the time. And quite frankly, as long as you're a 1-bid league and you're scheduling Stephen F. Austin in Cancun and not winning it, you're a 1-bid league.
And Kev, I just want to bring this up quick. So Stephen F. Austin, Southland Conference, that's a small league. That is not big time basketball. I don't even consider that mid-major, to be honest with you. They might be included in mid-major polls, but that's small conference. You look at the last 5 years under their coach, Kyle Keller, they were 16-5 last year. And it says their losses were Baylor, which understandable. They won the national championship. Louisiana and Monroe. They lost to Abilene Christian by 20, lost to Lamar by 5, and lost to Abilene Christian again. The year before was their special season, 28-3. That was a very good Stephen F. Austin team. Before that, 14-16, 28-7, 18-15. So they've had good seasons. They beat quality competition, but they mostly beat up on small conference opponents. It's like if UB was to go to Vermont and play the Catamounts. Sure, Vermont could beat UB. Vermont's had plenty of good seasons, but should you ever really accept losing to an America East team? No. And you shouldn't accept losing to a Southland Conference team either, because the goals for this team is to be amongst the best in the country. And this simply is a team that's not one of the best in the country. And I can't overstate, it was on a neutral court. You don't even have the whole road game disadvantage. You both were playing on equal situations. They just came to play and UB didn't.
And, it's a good example. It's like when you play the Colonial Athletic one that's pretty close to home, when you play the Towsons, the Drexels, the Delawares, the James Madisons, those kind of schools, it's the same thing. Those are games you were expecting. They were in the CBS Sportsnet bracket. Let's be honest. You were expecting to go to Cancun and play in the finals. The finals. I will put quotes around the finals. Don't care about that. I don't care about hosting or hoisting a trophy from Cancun. I care about getting the game against St. Louis. That's what you're after here. You're after an A-10 matchup. You're after a top 90, a top 80 team. That's what you went down there for on neutral floor. You didn't want to play that. You could have just scheduled St. Louis, but you didn't want to play it in their barn. That's what it was. St. Louis is right with you. That's a good game. It's a good neutral floor game. You don't even get it now. It's just disappointing. It's just disappointing all the way around. Stephen F. Austin to me was definitely, I guess, the 4 seed in this championship bracket. I mean, because if you see the breakout of it, the other side is like what? It's like Ryder. It's
really not a tournament. This was more of a predetermined. Yeah, because I know the Cancun Challenge, but you had 2 separate.
But ours is covered by CBS Sports. This is clearly the bigger side.
Yeah, the other side had our shortly accepted MAC member, Middle Tennessee State,
who lost to Stephen F. Austin in the campus games.
Did they? Okay, yeah. And they were the best of the teams on the other side. And then for this side, it was all set up for St. Louis versus UB. That's what the organizers were probably hoping for. But it really, Illinois State, that's a Missouri Valley Conference team. I guess you can't take them for granted, even though they are very low in the metrics.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't want to get two in the weeds there, but they're average in the Evansville, Drake, Valpo division, like that just goes to Loyola Chicago. Like, I think you can absolutely.
I think a fair question is, should at this point in time with UB, did we elevate them in the preseason to a level that they're just not at, or is there still time for them to get to that level? Because going into the season, I'll be honest, I was very high. I picked the Bulls to go 24-7, and I feel like maybe that was a game or two more than what I really felt in my heart, but I still
that 22-9, Mike. That 22-9.
I can't pick the same as Kevin. I'm always a teeny bit more optimistic than Kevin, but I thought it was possible, and I kept telling myself, okay, this is year 3 of Weitzel. Everybody's told me to be patient. Maybe we'll see more of that Oates style come out. With the senior class, we're going to see them finally put everything together, and I'm starting to wonder, after seeing a lot of similarities to the first 2 seasons, like, did I just miss the boat? Was I wrong? Like,
we gotta take this is a UB show. We gotta take our L's, myself included. We have to take our L's with football. I was 6-6. I was called negative by all of you guys. And I was wrong for being too positive.
I said 8-4. I honestly, it's funny because people want to sometimes say that we're too negative. I get it all the time on Twitter that people claim I'm too negative. And I say to the contrary, I think my biggest fault sometimes is that I buy into the preseason hoopla. And I think sometimes you fall guilty of that when you have ties to the program, when you know people and you feel a connection because you hear things and you buy into it. And I think where the negativity comes sometimes is maybe I have these inflated expectations of what to expect. And then when it inevitably doesn't play out that way, you're hard on them. So maybe it wasn't fair to have them as a top 60, 70 team, because there were metrics that said that maybe they were closer to 90 to 95, but there was a CBS.
I mean, you weren't off. I mean, Ken Palm had them at 80. You weren't. Yeah. I mean, you're not far.
I mean, there was a CBS sports writer that had them, I think, at like 64 or 65. And
yeah, I mean, it's not hoopla just around the program.
Yeah, when there's a big difference between 65, 70 and like 100 to 110. Like, you're 65, 70, you're thinking, wow, if we could have just beat St. Bonaventure, we could have gotten that top 50, top 45. Maybe we would have had a chance at large if we just didn't blow that game on the road to Eastern Michigan or something like that. When you're 100, you're like, oh, thank God we made it to the MAC championship and we have a chance to go to the tourney and we pull off an upset tonight. Like, there's a big difference between those two. And I think in these next 3 weeks, we're heading into MAC play and heading into mid-December. Hopefully we'll get a little bit more of an answer of, is this a team that is –
Here's for reference. Ohio was ended the year 81st, won the MAC against UB. They got a 13 seed. Buffalo actually finished ahead of Ohio, 77th. Got the final spot at the at-large in the NIT at 77th. You need to be in the top 80 to make the NIT, which UB's hovering around right now.
And teams declined it last year, right? Teams turned down the NIT because of COVID. So now that things are returning to normal, you might need to be even higher. I know they had a reduced field as well, but
they had a reduced field.
So, but you're basically hitting the nail in the coffin. You got to be around the top 80, top 85 to really even feel safe about your NIT chances. Not that if we're talking NIT at the end of the season, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, more importantly, I think the winner of the MAC will probably be similar to last year, right around that 81 mark. Ohio had a little rough stretch there before getting super hot in the tournament. They played pretty poor down the stretch. That kind of faltered to their 13 seed. But if you really look at it, like North Texas made it last year as a 13 seed, 72. Really to jump up to get to the highers, 12s, the 11s. UC Santa Barbara, 12 seed. 58th is the number to get the 12 seed, Mike. 58.
That's
you
hard.
You don't have room for error. You need to, like, with that loss, UB now needs to win every single out of conference.
I look at it like this: the best MAC teams I can recall, maybe in the past decade. Obviously, UB the year that they were 14th in the country at one point, and they got a 6 seed. I think the UB team the year before was one of the best ever. What seed were they the year they beat Arizona State? Was that an 11 seed or was that
13?
That was
a
67.
At a 67.
Okay, so the year they beat Arizona, they were 13 seed. Wow. And that was a really good UB team too. That's crazy. And then I would say the other few teams, I would say Ohio, I believe, went 27-9 during the 2011-2012 season, and they ended up getting, I think, a 13 seed. And there was an Akron team that was the Akron's had a couple special seasons too, but normally the highest you ever really see MAC teams are around that 12. Outside of the
year, UB was a 12. I think you're thinking of the year when they played WVU in 15 under Hurley.
Okay.
They were 58th Ken Palm, 12th seed. That's what they're shooting for. That's what you're shooting for.
You really, the difference between 12 and 13, like, that's important. 12 teams
in the 50s.
Yeah, 12 seeds are expected to beat 5s. Not when I say expected, I mean every year you expect at least one 12 seed to beat a 5. It doesn't always happen, but it's something that routinely you see. And 13 seeds, it's still considered kind of a big upset for a 13 to beat a 4. So, I mean, maybe it's a little bit of arguing over nothing and being a little bit over.
Well, what you are doing is, unless you're in the 50s, which is the 12 seed range we've talked about ad nauseum here, you're out. And UB just knocked themselves out of that large. And I'm not saying anyone had at large aspirations. I had it in the back of my head that it's always a possibility to think about when you have a talented team, especially with potentially Ohio in your conference. I can't predict Miami or Toledo at this point to do anything. I just can't. They haven't shown it. With Ohio, we're going to just focus on UB Ohio at the moment. We can change this in January or February for sure, Mike. Right now, if Ohio does get it done again in the tournament at the end, in the MAC championship, you had a way to go in the 50s. Now you don't. Now to get to the 50s, you pretty much need to be flawless in MAC play, maybe an Ohio loss or something, and you need to beat Bonnie's. I mean, there's no other room for margin for error anymore. Now, if that doesn't happen, which I think that already hasn't, you're out. Like, you need to beat, obviously your D3 opponents. I don't think really affect your ranking too much, but you need to beat the Bonnies. You need to beat WKU, Canisius, UCI, who's turned into an okay team, 3-1, the Anteaters, beating Pepperdine, Boise State. Their team right there that isn't a gimme. They're now 95. That game turned okay. 95 for Irvine at home, but it's at home, so it doesn't get as much. There's not as much pop to that win, but you need to take care of Irvine now. So you have a chance. You have an out here, Mike. You need to beat Illinois State. You need to the option to get back in it is to beat Bonnie's in St. Bonaventure.
Yeah.
Would probably raise you enough to supersede. You would probably sign off on a Stephen F. Austin loss, an Illinois State win, and then a Bonnie's win over beating Stephen F. Austin. So they have a chance to redeem themselves, one final shot at it, and it starts tomorrow against Illinois State. Obviously, take care of the D3 opponent, and then you have a chance for redemption against St. Bonnie's. If you just go and do the thing where you lose by 8, the thing Bonnie's is winning by 6-8 right now. If you go and just follow that trap and lose by 6, lose by 8, it's just not going to get it done, and you're going to continue to slowly trickle down right into the other rest, like you said, right where Ohio's sitting in the 80s, the 90s, right where Miami's kind of flirting with right now for the first time, going 5-0 right now. So, Mike,
that Bonnie game
needs to be said.
That Bonnie game
for this team.
It's still huge, and you know what? You're right. It's almost irrational for mid-major fans like us to expect an at-large bid going into a year. I don't think we ever expect it, but you have that hope that maybe they'll surprise the team, get a win, and maybe get off to a fun start, and then you never know. Like the thought process going into this year was, well, you're probably going to lose to Michigan. But if you can win heading into that Bonna game, like pull off 6-7 in a row, then beat Bonaventure, next thing you know, you could be something like 7-1 and thinking, okay, we just beat a top 25 team. We're around 40 in the net rankings, and we have a possibility to have a really special year. It's kind of sad that the dream ends before it ever had a chance of materializing, because I don't think a lot of people remember the 2018-19 Bulls. Yes, there was a lot of hype going into the year, but there was never the expectation that, oh, they'll be an at-large team. That didn't really start to materialize until after they beat West Virginia to open their season. And then they started piling good wins. They beat San Francisco and Dublin. They beat Syracuse. And then by that point, they had enough on their resume where you're like, even if they lose some MAC games, I'm feeling pretty safe about their chances. And it's because they kept building on it. And this team, unfortunately, won't really get that opportunity to do that. So it's just a little bit of the magic and the fun of it kind of has been taken from us before we ever got a chance to really get started with it. But that doesn't mean that they don't have anything to play for. They have a ton to play for. Like you mentioned, the UC Irvine game at home will be important. St. Bonaventure, that's a huge opportunity. You beat the Bonnies, you get to shut up your probably the most fierce opposing fan base that UB has right now. I know UB doesn't like Ohio. I know they don't like Canisius, but I would say St. Bonaventure for UB is probably that one fan base where UB fans just despise the most right now for basketball, even more so than the Akron.
I mean, look, it's their biggest true home game. I mean, it's there. If you're looking at it from their perspective, they're supposed to roll their out of conference schedule at home. They play some good tournament like they just did, and then they play in this classic against Connecticut and Virginia Tech. Yeah. But this is their biggest true home game. And if I'm them, I'm sitting there looking at like, I like the tournaments they were in, but then you have like this one UB game that sticks out to you. Like, I don't love it because that's a team that could upset us. So like, they don't get a lot out of it by winning by 6. They don't get a lot out of beating a team.
Credit to Mark Smith for even playing the game. Like, I expect it because it's a Big 4 game, but credit for them to even play this game.
Because team in the scary team in the 80s and 90s doesn't.
You know what? When you have Virginia Tech and you have UConn later in your schedule and you just beat Marquette and Clemson, that's a game I'm thinking UB has a chance. It's a class. I don't believe in trap games, but it's the classic. Are they going to be up for UB? I don't know if Bono will be, but I know UB will be up for the Bonnies. And the one thing about St. Bonaventure, they struggle to shoot. They're not consistent. They go on ruts just like UB does. The greatest thing about the Bonnies is they play great defense. But that's one of those games where Canisius was up 11 on St. Bonaventure in the second half with 10 minutes to go. There's no reason that if UB gets hot, that they can't give Bonaventure a game. And I think that's going to be the contest that tells me a lot about this team going forward. How they respond, the intensity that you see.
I mean, heck, they had to pluck a MAC player to stay competitive. Sorry, I mean they had to pluck Jalen Attaway from the MAC.
I mean, Attaway's been huge for them, and imagine if Miami had him still. I mean, like, what a good player. But yeah, it's still too early to freak out about the season. It's too early to say things are over, that they're screwed, and that they need to fire the coach. Way too early to say any of that stuff. But from anybody that's been reading my tweets, realize there are issues. There's quite a few of them right now. And in order for this Bull squad to reach their expectations, their goals, their potential, they need to work on this, on these things. And the good news is they got a month and a half, a little less than a month, actually around, I think they opened MAC play end of December, around a month to get ready for MAC play. And they got 2 to 3 months to get ready for March Madness. So they have time. They did it last year. Things did not get off to a good start last year, but they got things going heading into late February, early March, and they nearly made it to the NCAA tournament. So there's still the ability for this team to do that, but they need to fix these things. And part of the struggles that they're going to go through are going to end up hurting, I believe, their metrics in the long run when it comes to being a high seed in March if they do go to the dance.
And Ball State 20-3 in the fourth quarter there in Muncie. UB just not getting out of their own way. They're looking at staring at 4 straight losses right in the face for the football program. Really, you have one good game against Akron, one of the poorest teams in the country, one on and offsides against Ohio, one on a missed extra points against Old Dominion. There are makings there, Mike, to have lost 9 out of 10 games down the stretch outside of an offsides and outside of a missed extra point. 9 out of 10. Not the year you're looking for to get that thing going. Losing some key recruits in Websley Etienne and Makai Lynn. Lots of work to do on the football front. I predicted 6-6. As the weeks went on, I went 11-1 predicting the Bulls. My big loss was Bowling Green screwed me from my perfect season, my perfect UB season, and I picked UB. So my perfect season was ruined by Bowling Green again. Stupid Bowling Green by Bowling Green again. 11-1 pick in the Bulls. I'll take it. That shows you maybe that we know what we're talking about on bullet points. It's not negative. It's just what it is. 6-6. I saw some signs that even that was too positive. 5-7 right there, losing to Bowling Green. And then I said, I had this Ball State as a win originally in my original predictions. I almost kept it to the T, but I had this Ball State as a win in my early predictions. No way. Like there was no way that this was going to be a win. So come game week, I picked Ball State and UB's going to go 4-8. So even I was a positive UB fan. You can't sit here and say I'm negative when I predicted 6-6. They go 4-8 and I'm -2 in my prediction. I'm -2 to the positive.
Like I said, our season predictions, we've been off, but
Mr. 8-4 over here. Rob was probably 12-0.
Our season predictions were off, but our game by game predictions were pretty spot on this year. You were 11-1. I finished 10-2. I still am mad about that Kent State prediction because I told you that at that point in time.
Oh, that was the deal breaker.
I picked that to create separation, and that literally cost me the season pick 'em against you. But
and shout out to Ty. I think Ty was Ty a sneaky 10-2 as well.
Yeah, Ty. I believe Ty and me were second at 10-2. Degenerate L had a little bit UB confidence against NIU.
Oh yeah, he was right there to finish second too. Yeah, it cost him last week.
Maybe I can rob. All I'm gonna say is God bless them. I mean, they love their UB football almost too much.
Yeah.
Their predictions against Nebraska kind of put them behind the 8 ball before the season even started. But you know what? Football-wise, just a tough year. A lot of uphill battles from the beginning, losing Lance, having only 115 days or whatever it was to get transitioned to being a head coach for Mo Linguist, losing players to the transfer.
Myers throws his second pick.
Yeah, and then quarterback play, definitely not what they expected. Running-wise, I think they thought they were going to get more. Dylan McDuffie, pleasant surprise, had a huge season. Wide receiver Keon Williams, good season. But defense, a tremendous disappointment. This was supposed to be the strength of the team. Secondary was just awful. Linebackers, James Patterson, Gaddafi Wright, Tim Terry, they showed promise at times, but not enough consistency. Although James Patterson did have some flashy good moments. Defensive line, it's a kind of a story of what could have been. We just didn't see Taylor Riggins for the majority of the season due to injuries. Max Michel dealt with injuries. It's kind of just disappointing all around. And I guess the question going into next season was the reason for the Bulls' collapse this year, was it on coaching and a lack of adjusting? Was it a lack of depth that was a result of Lance Leipold leaving? Or was it just having too much faith in players that were upperclassmen that just didn't have it? Love Kyle Van Treese, like Matt Myers, but you got to wonder what they're going to do at the quarterback position going forward with Kyle Van Treese supposedly coming back for yet another season. Is that in the program's best interest going forward? We'll see next year, because if he's surrounded by a bunch of young players, it's hard to see it getting better. And the hope is they find things this offseason. They hit the recruiting trail. They bring in a lot of good, talented young players, and that they can build something formidable. But normally when you go through these struggles, it's going to be a couple years to rebuild the team back up. So I like Coach Mo. I like the message that he's preaching, but he's in kind of I'm kind of in wait and see mode. I'm not very optimistic going into next football season. I'm thinking that it's going to be 2023 before we really have something to be optimistic about, given the current scenario for the team.
Fine. Fair enough. Good wrap up on UB football. As you look at the real final recap of basketball, field goal percentage, shooting 51% for UB, 43% for Stephen F. Austin, 32% from three, just another bad night shooting threes. However, 28% for Stephen F. Austin. Free throws, 70% for UB, just below average, but okay. Stephen F. Austin, 56%. Some misses there at the end to kind of make that a little skewed, but rebounds, 38 UB, 39 Stephen F. Austin. Steals, 12 for Stephen F. Austin, 6 for UB. That's not enough aggression for me. 9 turnovers for Stephen F. Austin, which is pretty decent. 20. That's the number. The UB wins in most of the statistical categories. 20 turnovers, 11 turnovers by Segu and Mbala combined. That's just too many from your top three. And you needed a little bit more, 20 total points from Mbala and Jonathan Williams. Need a little bit more there too. You can't just have Segugu for 25. Just wasn't enough. Mike, to kind of recap it, those are your stats of the game, scores of the game, and the 79-78 loss to Stephen F. Austin, which I don't want to call it a shocker, but it's just not what you were expecting going down to Cancun. That I can say. Can't sit here and say it's some huge upset. But it is definitely a shocker for what they're expecting. Number one thing I do like to look at, though, let's take a quick gander. I like to take a look at the plus minus real quick, Mike. That's kind of interesting to me at times. So let's get that up now. We'll go over that, and then we'll head out of here because that kind of tells us who did what on the court and when. So, Mike, I'll bounce it to you quick, and then I'll pull it up. I'll pull up everything. What do you think needs to change beside energy? Like, we all agree that energy, and you need to not have stretches of 12 minutes without scoring and scoring 15 points. We get it. Like, we can't really beat that anymore. But what needs to change to you with this program as you really approach that Bonnie's game we talked about?
Well, when you play St. Bonaventure, you need to be able to shoot. They have length. They have athletes that can guard you on the perimeter. You really need to be able to kind of just get hot. And I think I know you said not to mention the intensity, but to me, that's the number one thing that it comes down to. This team just doesn't seem mentally prepared at times. And that's why I continuously bring up coaching, because when you have the 20 turnovers, that's a sign that you're not focused offensively. You're not on the same page with your teammates. When you allow the 15 offensive rebounds to an opponent, you're not battling on the boards. You're not putting the fight. You know what? Throw your body around. Make some contact. If you get a foul, at least it teaches your opponent you're not going to just let them take it from you. So a couple intensity and focus issues I have there that go on coaching. And I think this was an issue that we talked a lot about in the last couple of years, is how they would have early season losses against teams that you didn't think were necessarily on their level. They lost to Army back-to-back years. Another concern was that this UB team under Weitzel has struggled in the final 4 minutes of games. You saw Buffalo really give it to Stephen F. Austin for a 6-minute stretch to take the lead, and then once again, they lost the lead. Stephen F. Austin went on a 6-0 run to really kind of take control. So it's too general and vague to say that coaching needs to get better, but I would say the three things that need to improve, and improve soon if they want to have a chance against teams like St. Bonaventure and have a chance of being a very strong team this year. One, got to improve the focus, intensity in games. That's number one. You got to bring it every game. This team is not good enough to where they can just have dull moments and go on stagnant periods in a game. Number two, they need to improve the ball movement. They don't move the ball around. They honestly settle for a lot of average shots. At times I see some encouraging things, but I don't think the ball movement overall is that great on this team. And maybe that's because of my third point. Sometimes they just don't have the shooting. I feel like if they had the shooting, maybe you'd be a little bit more complimentary of the ball movement because the shooting would mask what you're seeing. But they need to improve the intensity. And they need to move the ball around better, and they need better shooting. Defensively, they're going to allow points. It's just the way they play. You got a small point guard. You don't have a lot of athletic big men outside of Josh and Bala. Skogman is kind of slow. Brock is a liability when he's on the court. Hardenett brings something, but he just doesn't get enough minutes to where he can really make a huge impact on this team. But there's a lot to work on. There's a list, and it's a long list right now. So it doesn't mean that they won't fix some of these problems and won't have it going in MAC play, but a lot of concerns.
Fair. I can't find the plus minus. My plus minus reset to the Illinois State St. Louis game, and it's 28-27. St. Louis only up one here, closing in on halftime. I mean, I think if you're a UB fan, Mike, you're rooting for Illinois State because you want that ability to play.
You still want St. Louis, yeah.
Regardless if it's the champion, you just lost anyways. So
who cares?
who
cares if it's off of a loss? St. Louis is going to be the better team.
Right.
I do like this one other point I got. One last thing. Eddie LB on Twitter just tweeted at me. I say it every game. UB interior post play is non-existent. Nick Perkins was a huge piece to UB's success. He was able to play with his back to the basket and was a reliable scorer in the paint when threes were not going in. This is an NIT team at best. And you know what? I like what Eddie said there. Nick Perkins, we don't have a guy like that on this team. Love Josh Mballa, love his hustle. He is a solid player. But Nick Perkins was a special guy. The fact that he could post a guy up, then extend them to the three-point line and hit a three, they do not have that dimension in this team. And it's something that's missing. And it's hard to get guys that can do that. It's hard to find 6'7", 6'8" big men that can post up and hit a three. But when you compare them to this 2018, 2019 team that Nate Oates had, there's really just no comparison. That team blew out good teams. This team is just hoping to beat good teams.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely true. As we're approaching halftime of that St. Louis game, 29-28, Illinois State.
Whoa.
I'm still going to think that that St. Louis comes roaring back, but maybe there's something to being in Cancun, having some fun.
What happens in Cancun?
Basketball being second. If we got a back-to-back top 100 team getting knocked off by a not top 100 team, I don't know. Maybe there's something to that. It's possible that some teams are going down there taking it like more basketball-y than others, and to each his own.
Yeah.
If you don't view it as a must win for your if you really don't think there's any chance at an at-large, then maybe I would treat it the same way. I don't know. That's tough to really know. But Mike, good hour show here today. Wanted to get some time in for Spaces on Twitter. We kind of took up the hour here. Not really much to chat about with the UB football game, but we're going to use Spaces. We had a good time chatting with some of you loyal followers to our show, and really giving some platform. So I do want to make time for Spaces. Maybe you'll jump on tomorrow, Mike, if you have some time at some point.
I'm down
to jump on, do 30 minutes again on Spaces rather than tonight. We'll jump on Spaces tomorrow. So check that out. So anyone still listening, check on Spaces. We want your comments. We had some fun interacting. It was a niche, low turnout crowd in the 20s, maybe 20s, 10s, 30s at times. Come listen into that. You can participate. You can chat in. We want to give you the floor on your opinions like we did on Twitter, reading off some of those. So would love to have you on our Spaces tomorrow. We'll go live from the bullet points rather than my Twitter next time in terms of the Spaces. We'll all retweet it a little bit. We'll get some chats in on that. Kind of recap the 6:30 game tomorrow against, I guess it's not for sure Illinois State, against potentially St. Louis tomorrow at 6:30 in the not championship game. I still think that's still a good game at the tournament we're rooting for. Like, who holds the trophy at the end? Good for you, Stephen F. Austin. You came down and you treated it like with respect, and that was your number one goal. More power to you. But I still think it's good for this tournament and for each team for a UB St. Louis matchup. So we'll see if that comes to fruition with one half of basketball there to go. Let's check in on that with St. Louis still down in that game, Mike. So maybe we'll get that, right? Is that at this point we'll wrap it up? Is that what you're looking for?
That would be a win, because you know what? When you lose to a team like St. Louis, you're not complaining at the end that like you're upset if you lose, but at least you realize you lost to a quality team. It's not going to hurt you much. You lose to Illinois State, well then, whoa! I don't even want to contemplate that.
And around the MAC real quickly, Kent State knocking off Georgia Washington, a pretty poor A-10 team, but did knock them off, one of the last rated A-10 teams, but good for you. Miami, Ohio taking care of a D3 school in Defiance to go to 5-0. Central Michigan losing to Bellarmine, a bad A-Sun team, 1-5. Wow. I mean, that's going to be a bad year for Central. Toledo knocking off Tulane by a point, 68-67 there in that one. So that
was that final.
That's final, 68-67 over.
Don't sleep on the Rockets. Do not sleep on the Rockets.
Yeah, I mean, the worst American team, but yeah, I mean, that is what it is.
Mid-major top 25 poll was released earlier today. UB was 10, Ohio was 15, Toledo 21, and Miami 25.
31-31 in that Illinois State St. Louis game as approaching 35 seconds left in the first half. 31-31 over there. So St. Louis is not having an easy go of it, but they're doing a little bit better than UB did, down 10 in the first half. That's if UB does this against Stephen F. Austin, they win. They didn't even play as good as potentially as St. Louis is here in the first half. Haven't watched much of it, but I do plan to tune in for the second half of that game after the show. So I'm really interested to see what that brings as we're approaching halftime in the other side of our bracket to see who we face off against. Really not much to say about Illinois State. That's just not a game you want to lose, and really there's not much to gain out of that. So I'm still rooting for Illinois State in that game to get that Stephen F. Austin, Illinois State, go play for the championship. I'll take the St. Louis matchup with a chance for a top 90 win, Mike. But from bullet points, what a great show. We'll get on Spaces tomorrow to have all of you guys in and interactions with us. We'll have maybe some other people from bullet points. We'll see who we can find, Mike. Maybe we'll get some cool people on Spaces. We'll start reaching out to some people today. We'll try to get on Spaces right after the game tomorrow. We're not going to do another show, so we'll try to get people on Spaces maybe around 8:30 to talk UB in that setting rather than in this live video setting. So really like everyone tuning in here. It's an hour show. Lots to vent about, and maybe hopefully some good things to vent about tomorrow. Because if not, man, I can't do a Spaces with another round 2 of this, Mike.
No.
That's not going to be fun. So from Bullet Points 716, I'm Kevin Masseri. That's Mike Bunt, and good night now.